Okay, folks, so we're now in the home stretch. We have actually done all of the heavy lifting here, which is we have set up our for loop that goes through every row in our data set. We have created we started by creating a new empty list that is where we're going to put our data so that we can write it to our new file. We are testing to see if the start station ID of whatever the current row is the one that we're looking for. And then if it is, which again is indicated by that indent, if it is, we're going to then go through each column header one by one, and we're going to say find the value that appears in the current row under that column header and append it to what is initially an empty list. Now, obviously, after the first time through here, right, after it adds trip duration, it's not going to be empty anymore. It's going to have one item. And so that's why we do that. It will automatically go through in the order that the field names appear, and it will just append them one by one. So we should hopefully get something that looks basically that looks exactly like our original data set, except that it will have only a single start station ID's a start station ID in it. So as I said, we've really done all of the heavy work here. The last thing that we need to do is actually write that new row of data to our output file. And we know how to do that because we did it before with the field name. So if we come back up here and look, what I'm going to do is actually just say, hey, it's the same thing. It's city bike rider right row, right? Because I want to put it obviously in the same file. Except this time it's going to be new row. Now, again, because again, new row is where I've put all of the data values. Now, what you'll notice here is that city bike rider, okay, has the same left margin or left indent as the for loop, right? I don't want to write to my output file every single time I go through this second for loop, because if I do, I'm going to get kind of a staircase of rows, right? The first one will have trip duration, the second one will have trip duration and start time, the third one will have trip duration, all for a single row of data. So I want to make sure I have gone through all of the column names before I actually go and write the data to my new file, and hence that outdent. They are both, however, still under this if statement, which means that this stuff only happens in the instance that the start station ID of the current row matches 72, okay? So I'm only doing that in that case. I don't actually, and that's sufficient, right? I don't need to do anything else. I just need to make sure that I'm writing it in that case. And after that, I should just be able to close my file. So I'm going to add my file closing part here because it's a good idea just to do that in any case. And so the only things that I need to close are the things that I have opened. So I have opened source file, so I'm going to need to close that. It's pretty simple. I'm copying and pasting, as you can see, because I don't want to, I want to save myself the difficulty of dealing with a misspelling. And so you see source file.close. Closing, unsurprisingly, is a recipe that doesn't need to take ingredients because we are applying it. We're sort of giving it to that in advance. We're saying, go to this thing that has been opened and close it. And likewise, I'm going to do that with output file. Okay. Again, a bunch of the time, it is not going to be a problem if you don't do this, but it's a very important habit to get into, just like commenting and all of that. Okay, so let's see how we do. So I do expect this to take a few seconds to run because, again, I'm living through quite a lot of data rows here. We know that we probably have several million at least, based on the 100,000 that we looked at being like a few days. So we probably have a few million. So again, I'm going to click up here and I'm going to kind of hit return and hold my breath. So I've been lucky that I haven't accidentally introduced any errors. I haven't, since that city bike rider the first time, I haven't had any of that. But of course, you know, that happens. It's not a big deal. You know, the key thing is to just, you know, look through and kind of see. And it should, in most cases, if you have an error, often give you a line number. I could also increase the size of this, right? So I think the other thing here is that you get a line number. So this is a really strong clue as to where the problem is. we use variable names, these labels, in many places often within a given program, so it's important to know which one isn't working. But if you're ever wondering what it should be converted to, you can always just look for the first time that it was created, right? So the first time that you created, that you introduced City Bike Writer, for example, that's the canonical one, right? That is the label. That's the thing that everything subsequent to it needs to match. So you can always go back to that first instance and use it as your guide, or like I said, just copy and paste it into the new areas where you need it. So now the trick is I'm going to go and look at my data file. And this is not Excel, but it's like Excel. It's just another spreadsheet program. This is actually a free open source one, and it looks like it worked pretty well. So I seem to have gotten all of the stuff that I was looking for. My start station ID is definitely consistent. I think I've captured all of my fields, because if I look over here, I have end station ID and name, latitude, longitude. So that's that. This is a way for me to go through and filter all of my data. And so obviously the thing that I want to do here is I want to continue to write out individual comments for all of my rows. I also want to make sure that I come back to my outline and I update it, which is basically here. I think just step 7. Probably want to add some more detail in here, right? Because I say compares. So actually, before I do this, what I ended up doing is I ended up saying creating a new empty list to hold my copy of the current data row. Now I compared the start station ID, so I would actually refer back through my program and update my outline to reflect what I actually ended up doing, right? So we use the outline as both a guide to deciding what to do next as we're writing the code in line, and then we go back and make sure that it matches whatever we ended up doing in the end, right? Because sometimes it changes what we aim to do and what we end up doing. So that's that. The other thing, one thing that came up during this week's assignment, which I just want to be clear about, this can be kind of frustrating. One of the kind of frustrating things about dealing with Python. I don't love that Python is structured this way, but I think it's a way. There was a decision made when the language was designed that it would work this way, and that's why it works that way, because it forces you to have readable code. So the thing about it is that everything needs to be left justified unless it is indented for a meaningful purpose, like because it is a for loop or because it is an if statement. And again, this for loop only applies inside this if statement, so it too is indented. Any other white space that appears in the left margin is probably going to cause a problem. So in this case, you see that it says indentation error, unindent does not match any outer indentation level. Okay, that is a complicated way of saying there is white space to the left of this line, and I don't understand why. And so it's natural that this happens as we're writing. Again, Lucene retentive copy editor you've ever had. Computers are not clever. They cannot infer what you're trying to do. They have to be instructed very, very, very precisely in order to understand what you want them to do. So that is all for this week. I think when we get to this, what we'll be able to see for next week is actually a really quick way we can fold our regular expressions into this, which is kind of nice. Because again, that's a really powerful technology for kind of filtering and evaluating data. And at this point, there isn't anything that you're going to come across that is going to be more powerful than Python. So whether you're dealing with, 100 records or 1,000 records or 100,000 records or 1,000,000 records or 10 million records, Python is going to be the tool to do it. And hopefully you're starting to see how efficient this can be. So as always, please, if you have any questions, post them to Piazza, and I will look forward to seeing you all on Monday.